So I was talking with my wife this week. We were actually doing a kitchen remodel. And as we're going through the electrical changes that were happening in this space, we've talked about how we kind of hide and conceal some different switches. And it brought up the subject of lighting control and how much we love having lighting control in our home, and how it's probably the technology that has exceeded our expectations and the thing that we love the most. How do you guys live, and how do you feel about that? And what are you seeing?
It's interesting because where I live, as people may know, is a large apartment block, and it's 50 floors high, and the apartments at the top are a lot more expensive than the apartments at the bottom. And you occasionally go to one of the apartments of the people we call that live in the clouds, and they have no lighting control. And when you say to them, how do you survive this huge apartment with no lighting control? And they go, well, we were quoted and it was another $20,000. We didn't really understand the benefit of it. And I always say to them, come into our apartment. Let me show you what we did with lighting control. And they go, well, why didn't anybody explain this to me? Because I always say to them, I don't know how we would live without lighting control. Clearly we could live without lighting control, but just the simple things of a button by the door, which says, I'm leaving home, all shades go down, all lights go, to an automatic program. Or at nighttime, we press a button and the light changes in the room. I mean, it's changed the way we live in a home. And it's one of the hardest things, I think, if you've never had it, to really explain the benefit of it. But the moment you've had it, it's really hard to live without it.
Well, it's just
Mhm.
so easily to offhandedly say, well, I can push a button on the wall. Like I can flip a light switch. It's not that hard. I don't need lighting control. And I get why clients feel that way, especially if they're, being introduced to a whole lot of new ideas at one time. But we really do them a disservice if we don't push them to understand it, right? I don't need to push you to buy it. I just want to make sure we're speaking the same language. Like you said, the single button by the door that shuts the whole house down. For me, in our house, it's the lights being on in the evening. It's not having to walk around the house at 11 o'clock to turn all of our lights off before I go to bed. They just do that. The lights on the second floor outside the kids' bedrooms go off by 8:30 because they're supposed to be in bed. All the lights should be off. If we forgot and left them on, or if they're kind of staying awake, it gives them a cue to go to bed. Like those are just simple things that, yes, we could do that automatically, but I'm probably not going to make an extra trip upstairs to make sure all those lights are off every night, if I don't have to. And so, we have found in our family, it gives us more time and it makes the house a better place to live in. And I don't mind not walking into a dark home. I don't
Yeah.
ever feel like I have to do that again.
Yeah, and this will probably date myself here, but I'll tell you, uh, I kind of view lighting control like the automatic car window, right? I remember my first vehicle. It's a 1987 Chevy Cavalier Z24. It was awesome. I burned my clutch out in like the first month I had it. It was great, and tires and all kinds of stuff. But I'd always have to lean over and crank the window down to get it to go down, right? And now the cars that we have, you hit a button and you don't have to even hold it down anymore, and it'll go down, or you pull it up one time and it comes all the way back up. You don't put your key into the car door to let yourself in. You just walk up to it, open the handle. There's proximity sensors that go through all those things, and it all works for you. And lighting control fits that same bill, right? And you've both kind of gave examples of how that kind of works. And I think that the ability to have things work kind of collectively together, you get a couple main benefits out of it. One is we can actually dim, right? My wife and I rented a home in Breckenridge, went skiing with our kids a while back, and we get in this house, and um, at night it got really dark because there wasn't a whole lot of outside lighting, because they couldn't put outside lights on the house because there was kind of a dark sky kind of mandate in that area. And so we would have to go through the home and like turn on lamp lights and stuff like that to give it kind of this like softer feel, like an evening type of feel out of it. But it was literally running around the house trying to find all the lamps and turning those things on, and then making sure at night, as you're running through the house in an unfamiliar space, make sure not to kick a sofa or a table, and turning them all back off so that you could go to bed at night. And it was odd. The ability to have the ability to turn on the lamp lighting was great, and the ability to dim it and get it to the right level was really, as part of a convenience that happens when you get lighting control that you don't necessarily get when you don't have those things. And so I think it's a little bit about understanding lifestyles, like who's living in the house, how do you plan on living in the home, how do we ensure that the lighting works both as a comfort level and how a house should feel, and then secondly, how do we keep it? It's a safety and security thing. How do we make sure that we have the appropriate amount of light on so that you're never coming home to a dark home? Or if you're traveling, that your wife and your family are never coming home to a dark home, and that it's safe that way. Or the convenience that Keith, you said, the ability to walk out the door and you're the last one out of the house and hit an away button and have everything shut off and not have to run around, or the things shut off that you want to shut off, but things left on so that it looks lived in still, and make sure that your house is still beautiful from the outside street and functional. So,
Yeah.
And you can start to combine these things in an interesting way. So in our living room, at 30 minutes before sunset, the shades go up and a light in the corner goes on. And when we go to bed at night, we hit the good night button by our bedroom door. And the light that went on 30 minutes before sunset drops to 25% or 15% amount of light. And so, there's a difference between saying turn the lights on at 8:30 and turn the lights on 30 minutes before sunset. And, rather than have a light dim for security reasons at a certain time, you can make it. And it's the way you combine all of these things into your life that makes the home feel like your home and much more personal. And I think it's hard. You've got to live with it to some extent to know what these things are. But it's as you start to combine these systems together, things really feel different, I think.
Yeah, I would say for most of our clients, it's not a question of like which clients lighting control is a good fit for. It is just kind of a scope. Like it's how much do you need to accomplish what you want? So like I said, in our previous home, we had a few lamps on lighting control and the exterior lights. And in a very open, small home, that was plenty. But I think for a lot of our clients, when they get really used to it, they want to be able to have the lighting control help them entertain, help them have a security button that turns on all the lights because they know that their family stays there at night while they're on, traveling for work or whatever it is. But I definitely think you could scale it and still have it be usable at a lower level or get a lot of power as you scale it up. But it kind of does work for everybody.
Yeah.
Now you can cheap your way into this, let's not forget, because you can buy 50 devices to put between the lamps and the fuses, and you can buy light bulbs that are all independently programmable and stuff. But just remember, when you do that, you became the integrator. What people pay us to do is do that for them. Mm-hmm. And so there are cheaper ways to do this, but they'll be more expensive in terms of the amount of time it's going to take you to maintain. Sorry, Jim, I interrupted you.
Yeah, and they're really, that's a good comment, Nigel, because there are levels of which you can enter into the lighting control kind of implementation in your home, right? There's kind of a do-it-yourself kind of model, as you just mentioned. There's a small step above that with kind of entry-level Lutron parts called Caseta that can do some things there. It would be a far greater experience than just doing bulbs and different things off of it. And I don't think you could spend a whole lot more money on that. And then you have kind of next levels and next levels and next levels, depending on the scope and the needs of what you go through. I think one of the things that's really challenging and that people generally have a hard time wrapping their minds around, and even as we're talking about this, we're pinpointing little things that we do in our own homes and how that affects us, is that it can be overwhelming to try to figure out what is a lighting control system going to actually do for you. And one of the things I think that Bravas and that we do really well for clients is that, we're deploying, at least here in Houston, I will tell you, we do 50 homes a year that have lighting control built into them, one a week. That's what we always tell our guys, right? And we know enough about what most people do and what the habits are that we can get you 90, 95% to the point of how it would work. And then we customize that last percentage based off what your habits are. Are you an early riser or a late to bed person? Do you have kids? Do you have, travel schedules? Do you have multiple homes? And so you're out of town for months at a time, or however that works. And we can then kind of figure that out, but you don't have to build it from scratch. We will help you get there, and we will make that process simple and easy so that it doesn't become overwhelming as you're trying to figure out what that needs to look like for your specific needs. We know those questions. We know how to help guide you down that road, and we will help you get there and make that an easy process.
Mm-hmm. I'll tell you another one I've seen used in a home, which is, unless you've seen it demonstrated, you might not know about it. That's pathway lighting. Mm-hmm. The fact that you can, if you're someone who likes to go and raid the fridge at, 1 o'clock in the morning and you don't want to turn the lights on in the whole house, one button can set a set of lights that guide you through a pathway. It's, in a big home, some of these things make a big difference.
Yeah, you could even take it a step further and have a motion sensor under your bed that doesn't take effect until midnight. And when you get out of bed, it lights a faint path to the bathroom and to the kitchen. And whichever way you go, you've got still a very dim, low level of light that's not going to wake you up, but it's going to help get you safely to your destinations.
That's right.
I guess the last thing for me in this subject is when you go into a home and they don't have lighting control, what they have is a bank of sometimes seven or eight switches on a wall, which, by the way, no one in the home knows what all seven switches do. And some of them control fans, and some control lights, and some control lights that are on, on things on the floor that they don't know which is which. When you see lighting control done, you get rid of that wall acne, don't you? And you reduce it sometimes just to one panel with a set of switches on. When you talk to people, Kevin, how do they decide? Do people get that difference?
Whenever we start talking about lighting control, we talk a little bit about the function of what lighting control can do for people. But I would say probably the thing that catches their attention the most is the fact that they can get rid of these banks of switches, right? You don't have a 4-gang switch followed by a 3-gang switch at your front door. Now you have a beautiful, elegant keypad that's really simple, that's very easy for anyone to come over and use. A babysitter can walk in that's never been in your house before and read a keypad and be able to control the lights that come out of it. Your in-laws can come over, they can, hit a button that says family room and turn on the lights in that space so that they're never walking into a dark room and they're not hammering paddles all over the place and trying to figure out which lights were left on and which ones were off. And so I think that that's actually one of the things that most people get right away and really find value in. We're in this world now where we want the walls clean. We want our counters clean. We want everything to have a place and an organization that comes along with it. And I think this is just a thing that falls right on top of that and really helps us to get rid of the wall clutter that comes out of it, and making sure that we have that done right. And they can become a design element. We can have them be finished in, a beautiful metal finish or a very clean, sleek, modern look, if that's the style of your home that goes to it. Or it can match the hardware that happens, that you have throughout your house on, in the kitchen and the different cabinetry pulls that you have. And so there's a lot of ways to do that not only cleans those things up, but then adds a little bit of style and a little design element that happens alongside that.
Yeah. I've always joked that there are very few things in my clients, 10,000 square foot home that I also had in my dorm room in college. But these commodity grade light switches, they're the same in your house as they were in my dorm room. Maybe we could consider a non-commodity option. But now with Palladium and Elise keypads and what Crestron and Control 4 and Savant have all released, there are really beautiful options that can add to the design of your home. We have the bank of 7 switches. I think we can all agree detracts from your home, especially when you have 7 in the kitchen and then 7 right on the other side of the column in the living room. And they each control some of the lights in the other space. That is a huge detractor from a very well thought out space otherwise. To be able to take it
been in?
Oh my gosh.
Where you see labels on switches. I see that all the time. And I'm like,
Kevin, I went into a home on an architecture tour where they had 7 switches, but they couldn't find a 7 switch plate that had, I think it was 6 switches and 1 rotary dial for an audio controller, like a volume control. And this was just a few years ago. And so they took 2 plates and they cut them in half and put them together. And it was a home designed by a famous architect, but obviously he didn't really have a lot of input into the technology. So they just made do with what they had.
My favorite thing is when you go into people's homes where they've taped over the switch so you can't turn it on or off, or they actually have one of those little plastic things that stop you. We don't know, you can't turn that off, because you turn that off and the whole left side of the house goes dark or something. And so why do you have the switch at all? I mean, that's, if you're building a brand, it's different if you're renovating, I get it. But if you're building a new home, you've got to ask yourself a question: why is there any switch at all?
I have a light in my house that when I'm asleep, if someone turns it on, it shines directly into my eyes. And no one ever uses it, but they forget which switch it is. And they'll hit it. And it wakes me up in the middle of the night. Now that I think about it, Nigel, I need to just take the switch out, just leave a hole in the wall.
That's the trick. Just leave bare wires. It'll be fine.
It'll be fine.